Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is krmorrighan and today I'm going to be talking about the Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. So it's actually a really interesting looking book. I only point that out because it's like such a cool fusion of the original authentic image mixed with this like orange and blue. Such like a striking color combination, I think. Like I would never think to, I don't know, make my book these colors. So I just wanted to point that out because I think it's really cool. The Song of Achilles is historical fiction based on the various myths and legends about Achilles, his youth, his training, and of course his part in the Trojan War. It's actually not told from Achilles' viewpoint at all, which I think is fitting because that would have been kind of awkward. It's actually told from the view of his best friend and lover, Patroclus. Patroclus starts out as his childhood friend, and then throughout the book he becomes not only his brother in arms, but they fall in love and they have a really complex relationship as the story goes on. I would say about half the book is about Achilles and Patroclus as young men and boys together, and then I would say about the second half is about them and their experiences during the Trojan War. So about the setting, I think the author, here's a picture of her right here, I think she did a fantastic job illustrating and explaining the various aspects of ancient Greek culture. It says in her little blurb here that she has bachelor's and master's degrees in Latin and ancient Greek. So she has read these legends in the source material, in the Greek source material. I really trust her judgment about what is right to say, I guess, and like how to bring these things across to a modern audience. It also says that she studied at the Yale School of Drama, specializing in adapting classical tales for a modern audience. And that's essentially what this book is. So you get the sense that this book is like her baby, like her culmination of every single thing that she's learned and studied for. And she just did a fantastic job of making a foreign culture seem really familiar. And it might not, you might think like, oh, it's not really that foreign because like then, you know, like Greek culture inspired the Roman culture and then that inspired a lot of like Western culture. But the truth is, anything that old, that ancient is just innately like totally different from our lives now. So it's really hard, I'm sure, to have their values come across, and she did a fantastic job doing that. So one of my favorite things about this setting, and just kind of in general, the way she writes, which is very true from what, at least my minuscule knowledge, very true to the original Homeric tales, is the gods are characters. So Chiron, who is the centaur who trains Achilles, and I think Thetis, I'm going to say Thetis, that sounds better. Thetis, who is Achilles' mother, she's a goddess, she's like a minor kind of goddess. The way that they are characters, and that all the gods in a sense are characters, is really true to the original story. So in the original story of the Iliad, the gods kind of like pick sides and they're sort of like arguing. It's like, you get the sense that watching humans war is kind of to them like us watching a football game or us watching a soap opera. Like they kind of pick sides and they meddle with each other and they like cheer when they win, you know? So you definitely get that kind of sense of the gods as being like directly involved. They're not just sort of abstract figures hovering above. They're like in there, and I thought that was really interesting. My absolute favorite thing about this book is the characters. I've read the Homeric epics. I know what happens. I knew what was going to happen, but like seeing the characters go on that journey was absolutely breathtaking. And Achilles and Patroclus have a fascinating love story. So Achilles is like this hero and this demigod and this person who absolutely goes down in fame. Like Achilles is one of the few names from that time that we all know. Patroclus is kind of like this exiled prince. He's kind of clumsy. He's not that good at anything. Not really that impressive. So what happens is then from an outside point of view, there's almost this sense of unequalness or inequality between the two of them. But the characters don't seem to see it that way, especially as the story goes on and Achilles struggles with pride and hubris, and Patroclus is kind of this like steadying presence, and Achilles will say, you know, you're a better man than I am. And I thought that was just such a complicated dynamic between them, and Patroclus never seems to have feelings of like, oh, I'm not as good as Achilles, I'm in this relationship with this man who's so much better than me. He kind of was just like, yeah, Achilles is a hero and I'm just me and that's okay. You know, Achilles loves me anyway. It was really awesome to see the motivation of Achilles for kind of everything that takes place in the Iliad, because in the original story it just kind of happens, and you don't get any sort of view into his head. Not really, not like you do in this story. You really get a sense through Patroclus, who knows him better than anyone. You really know what Achilles is thinking at each step of the way. So one thing about the plot of this book is that it is not a plot-driven story at all. It is entirely character-driven. The plot kind of meanders, and that makes sense, right? Because it's operating off the assumption that people know the original story, and it's just kind of showing you the characterization and the thought process of the characters along the way. But if you don't really know much about the mythology or how the story ends or what happens during the Trojan War, I can see it kind of bothering you, because kind of the first half of the book, before they get to the Trojan War, there's like essentially no plot. Like, Patroclus goes live with Achilles and then they like hang out, and it's awesome to read because it's really well written and the characters are really interesting, but it's not exactly like action driven. However, if you are like me and you know a little bit about the story of Achilles and Patroclus and what happens during the war, then it's a really cool read, because you kind of get a perspective on everything that happens behind the scenes and the kind of motivations of the characters as we go from point A to point B. As far as the way this book was written, so to talk about the writing style of this book, the only real words I can use to describe the way she writes are quiet and, I want to say, understated. So it didn't have big words, it didn't have long descriptions, which is, I thought, really interesting, because that's kind of the opposite of the Iliad. There's a part in the beginning of the Iliad where they describe all the ships who came to help them go to war. It goes on forever, and it's like, so-and-so brought this many ships, so-and-so brought this many ships, and it does that for like, oh my god, so long. So I thought it was really interesting, actually, the way she chose to write this book was like the total opposite of that. So it's not that she doesn't describe it, she just gives you like just a hint of it, and then you fill all the gaps in. What I'm saying is, rather than giving you maybe a larger, more vague description, she would narrow in on one thing and give it a very, detailed description, and that was just sort of her writing style. The narrator of this story was Patroclus, and he was kind of like a spirit. Even though it was told in the first person point of view, it was like he was telling his own story and Achilles' story to a foreign audience. So the way it kind of seems to me, looking back, reflecting on the writing style, is that it's like as if Patroclus was like the ghost of Christmas past and like came to you and was like, let me tell you my story, and you watched all these things happen at the same time as he sort of explained them to you. So in that sense, it's like you have this really natural interweaving of cultural elements. It's not like Achilles and Patroclus are having like weird exposition-y conversations, which I don't know how her process was, but if I was going to write this story, that's something I would struggle with. Like, how do I get the seriousness of these things across without having the characters like openly talk about things that they all already know, because it is their culture. So that was a really good choice on her part, and it didn't really occur to me until after I read it how unique that is, the way she did it. So I would recommend this book to anyone who was interested in history or mythology, or anyone who was studying the classics, anyone who's into literature. I would super recommend this book because it's going to be like right up your alley. I would have everybody read this book instead of the actual Iliad if I was a teacher. I would also recommend this book to people who are fans of fantasy, because it has this very fantastical feel about it. I mean, there's gods and magic and like crazy things happen. Just like, this isn't in this book, there's one part in the Iliad where like randomly the horses just start talking to each other. Like, that's the kind of stuff that happens in these books, like magic and gods and goddesses and heroes, and like there's a centaur. Like, this is definitely, if you like fantasy, you could definitely like this book. Something else I kind of thought about when I was getting ready to make this review is that maybe if you liked the Percy Jackson books when you were younger and now you're ready for something that's a little more grown up, I would also recommend this, because it has that same sense of like bringing the old mythology into our world. I would definitely recommend it if you're into romances and not erotica, especially if you're into gay romance, obviously, but even if you're not, this is a great place to start because it's really mild and it's mostly just about their like love, and it's really not a very physical book. So yeah, don't forget to comment. You can follow me on Twitter, you can follow me on Instagram, you can follow my WordPress blog. I have my books available for purchase on Amazon, and I'm soon going to be adding more. I know I've been gone for, I don't know, like 2 months. It's been a really long time. I'm a student, and I was finishing up my last full semester, so it was just a lot. You know, I was working at the same time, so it was just a lot, but I'm back now. It means a lot to me to be able to make videos for all of you, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you read this book if you can. Keep reading and keep loving. Bye.